writing down, moving away from the company capstones, this will be the first empirical capstone. So mine was on preferred stocks, and I'm continuing off the work from Anthony Benedict's last year. And this will be the agenda for today's presentation. We'll first begin with just a quick textbook definition of preferred stocks as a whole. So we're all on the same page. The very 5 types of preferred stocks. The fundamentals, what I learned from Anthony Benedict's work, along with the journal articles I've been analyzing throughout the year, throughout this month. The results of my own study, a conclusive analysis, and then followed by additional analysis to address any questions that you may have. So a definition of preferred stock. It's similar to common stock, but you lose the right to vote while getting a preference of getting paid dividends above common stock. But this actually gets rather complicated later, as we'll learn. Is there's types of preferred stocks that are subordinate preferred stocks, which they get a lower preference than the preferred stocks themselves, but they still are above common stocks. And then this is a really big point when we're analyzing it as an asset class. And then a lot of Anthony Benedict's work was this focal point of study. It's that he wanted to show that they were very similar to bonds, and this is also why preferred stocks often get overlooked or overshadowed, because there's usually a lot of comparisons to bonds, and then it brings up a lot of questions to portfolio management, whether or not, like, if you add preferred stocks to your portfolio, if it will actually add any diversification benefits if you already have pre-existing bonds. So then these are the 5 types of preferred stocks. Convertible, cumulative, participating, callable, and adjusted rate. So I'm going to go quickly over the 5 definitions. So participating stocks are usually issued by smaller firms or startups, usually considering Elliott's firm. And these firms are they usually have incentives tied to the stock. Usually if a criterion is met, they'll pay something on top of the dividend that is embedded in the stock. Then there's convertible. Usually these can be exchanged for common stock, whether if you see the company is changing directions and you want that right again to go, or you see that the common stock is rising, you can trade it in at a predefined ratio. And there's adjustable rate, which usually when preferred stocks are issued, they're issued at a rate. From the 674 preferred stocks I analyzed, this usually fell between the 2 to 7%. So these will adjust the rates of the T-bill, which is nice. And then these are the 2 focal points of the types that will be a big part of the study I completed myself, which is cumulative stocks, which are stocks that if they do miss dividends, the value will add up, and then they will still pay this. So this is interesting, and usually preferred stocks always fall in the realm of cumulative or non-cumulative. While callable, as we all know, usually that the issuer of the stock can recall the stock. So then the foundation of the analysis, what was I going into this capstone knowing? As Anthony Benedict, a lot of his work was primarily targeting the relationships between preferred stocks and bonds, and he did this through various regressions. The point he really found, and he pointed through his research, is that indeed preferred stocks and bonds, they have a really, really high correlation. I believe his value was like 1.03. So adding those to your portfolio, they won't really add any diversification. But then he also made the argument that preferred stocks, they do give dividends, so it's another form of income. If they are similar, it's a little better to get like 0.03 difference in their correlation to add just a slight bit of diversification. But if you have preferred stocks or bonds already in your portfolio, you should know this. You shouldn't be like, I'm going to buy this because it'll add a significant diversification to my portfolio as a whole. And then a work by, then I found various journal articles, but they usually primarily dealt with only one of the categories, the preferred stocks out of the 5 I listed earlier. And this brings me to my own study, which is the question of how did the different options in the preferred stock affect the returns and the risk reduction? And this is really interesting because it ties into a lot of the work that Benedict did last year, because he randomly selected 10 convertible, callable, and bonds, and just compared them, which is rather interesting because a lot of his data, a lot of the ones that he chose are callable. And you'll quickly see that a lot of the types of stocks, they have very limited number that you can choose from. So a lot of his callable stocks he used for that assessment, they actually were callable and adjustable rate. So they had a different option. That led me to my next question for my study, which was how do these options dilute the return or the risks that can be found in preferred stock? And then obviously after doing this, I'll have more questions. Because when we find answers, we often find new questions. So these are my results. As you can see from my data was gathered through the Wall Street Journal recommended by Professor Ince. We found that there was 674 total preferred stocks currently active in the market. Of these, you can see that, the top section is pure. So these are only having that specific option. So the vanilla are just plain stocks. They don't really have any extra options. But like for instance, cumulative, that's only cumulative stocks. And there's only 55 stocks that fall in that category. But actually, if you look down below, these are when they start getting more complex. When they have those like added, when they become cumulative and callable. Or these are the most complicated ones, where they're floating, cumulative, and callable, all three in one. But as we quickly see, and in regards to benefits work, that pure callable stocks only fall only six of them fall into this category. To raise the question, if he randomly just selected 10 of 6, he must have went into these other realms of callable stocks, which would most likely change the results or alter them. Because as you can see, when you go from the average holding period return of a cumulative stock of 55 of them, it's 7.21%, and callable, only having 6 though. So it also raises the question of the difficulty of analyzing this data, because certain categories, as you can see, have very limited that are very pure, that aren't diluted by the effects. The most popular one, as you can see, is cumulative callable. And we can see that 8.16% return shows the middle point between cumulative at 7.21% and then callable at 11.23%. So you're getting like in between, you're getting the risk reduction while getting the intermediate return. And this raises also outliers, as you can see, convertible stocks, pure convertible stocks. There's only 14 of them, and it shows that it's negative 1.13%. And it's actually kind of funny because it's through a company named Cliff. Negative 40% return, so that very altered this one. So hopefully you know that when there's very limited pool, as you can see, maybe from this you would recommend highly that floatable and callable preferred stocks are really great. Seeing at 14.6%, but you have to also know that that's only 3 stocks that fall into that category out of 674. So this makes me into the conclusions. So we have to see the options that it did indeed change the valuation, as we see moving away from just 6 callable stocks into the 123 that were callable and cumulative, that the return increased. And then effect on the asset class as a whole. So a lot of the work, as I previously stated, a lot of the journal club articles that I'm reading through, I think they try to avoid these intricacies of preferred stock as an asset class through the various options, because it's very difficult, as we saw earlier, that the observations are so limited. And actually, and if you probably noticed that there wasn't any data on participating stocks, and I found it really, really difficult to find anything using the PLU database and the WASI database. But it was really interesting, and the only article I found was from 1923, and it had 10 stocks that fell into participating, that had the participating option, but those stocks aren't active anymore. Or a point that I didn't get to touch on is usually when preferred stocks issue, usually if there's issue A, issue B, issue C, as they continue issuing, if they issue initially with various options, so if they refer to initially, they're cumulative, floatable, and callable, usually after on issue A, on issue D, they usually drop one of those options. And you won't be able to see it here, but I have it on an additional slide to questions. Obviously, again, limited observations. When we look into those pure categories, like float or callable that only has 6, there will be outliers that really change the flow. And then at the same time, can we really drop an outlier if there's only, for instance, just three data points? You drop one, then you go down to 2. Drop out 33% of your data, right? So it makes it really difficult. And then also a deeper look into the vanilla category. The majority of them were simply vanilla, but 30% of them had different options that didn't fall into the 5 that we discussed, they were subordinated or they were depositary. So if I had more time, I would want to look into those 30% that I put into vanilla. Once again, that's addressing new categories and then reevaluations, the new effects, possibly new options that may arise, and then obviously return analysis. Every year, more returns are changing. Possibly the outlook on preferred stocks are changing too, so that will change it, and then that will assist in the confirmation of reevaluation. And now, I'd like to open the floor to any questions that you may or may not have.
The different options are different volatilities. Did you find different volatility among preferred stocks?
Yeah. So, and for the Bank of America, they have a lot of preferred stocks. So we can see that, for the non-cumulative, this was issued at a 6.625%. This was Series I, so this was much later. And we see it as a 1.72 return. And then when they had a floating, it's at 10.96. So even though it's from the same company, you can just see how the options just change significantly.
I mean, like, I'm talking about like time series volatility of preferred stocks.
Oh, okay.
Did you find like the standard deviation of callable versus is higher than?
That was a lot of what Anthony Bennett explained. I
Oh,
didn't
really?
touch on it.